Wade Nobles is one of the more recognizable names of African psychologists in the country. When we talk about African psychology, one of the names that usually comes to mind is Wade Nobles. And he has done very significant work in the field in helping to define it and helping those of us who are in the field of psychology to understand what our roles need to be and the kinds of things that we need to do to help to liberate and uplift our community. It really has been an inspiring and enlightening opportunity for me to be able to be in his presence and to learn from him. Dr. Wade Nobles is an experimental social psychologist. He received his degree from Stanford University. Also, he is the director of the Institute for the Advanced Study of Black Family Life and Culture and a professor of Black Studies at San Francisco State University. Those accomplishments and those activities don't even begin to speak of the kinds of contributions he's making, not only in psychology, but just to us as African people. He's written a number of books, and some of those will be on sale following his presentation. Dr. Nobles is here through a collaboration with a Kuntu Writers Workshop and the Western Pennsylvania Association of Black Psychologists. I'm greatly pleased and honored to have the opportunity to present to you Dr. Wade Nobles.
I am pleased and honored to speak in this forum because I earnestly believe that as I travel around the United States, and I travel probably more than I would like to travel, I see something happening in the African community. And what has happened is that we have taken back the responsibility to educate and liberate ourselves through important information. And that's happening in the community. That's not happening in the universities where, we work. It's happening in the community. And I think that's something that can't be controlled. And so it's an opportunity for us to really struggle with important ideas that are uncensored. And so I am always, and I'm absolutely elated. And when I go back to California, I will talk about these Pittsburgh Africans and how they're doing what they're supposed to do, because I think that you are doing what you're supposed to do. It is my custom that before I make my remarks, I also ask permission from elders to present. And I think it is unnecessary for this moment because it has already been done. But I do want to just footnote that the reason Africans invented that custom was because we understood that as the teacher came around to various villages and to various places to educate, that the responsibility of eldership, the primary responsibility of eldership, is to protect the community. Even though in our story we see the warrior being the person who protects the community or protects the village. But in actuality, it is the elder that has the responsibility for protecting the community, because the elder has to protect the community from ignorance. And that while the elder may protect them from a muscular invader, it is more important that we protect ourselves from ignorance, because the ignorance creates a damage that does not heal. And so the elder's responsibility is to do that. And by asking the elder for permission, you in fact are giving and reclaiming that responsibility and authority to say, we will not allow just anything to come into our community, and elder, please protect us from that. It is my hope that the request from the elders also applies to me. But if it didn't, then an elder should stand up and say, sit down. And that would be okay, because it is part of the responsibility for elders to do that. And then I have an obligation to simply ask elder, what is it that I have not learned well? So that I can go back home and learn it, and then maybe one day be invited back to do the work that the ancestors have given me to give. So I will pause for a moment. No elder has stood up, so I would assume that by that action I do have your permission. It is also my custom to ask all of you to allow me to assume a posture of reverence and respect while I give praise and credit to the source of all knowledge. And I do that by saying out loud, and it's important to say out loud, by doing that by saying out loud that the Almighty, who is sometimes called Amun, and is sometimes called Aset, and is sometimes called Ptah, and is sometimes called Sheshach, and is sometimes called Jehovah, and is sometimes called Obatula, and is sometimes called the Christ, and is sometimes called Oshun, and is sometimes called Shango, and is sometimes called Allah, and is sometimes called Oya, and is sometimes called Olutumari, and is sometimes called Atun, that Almighty God, Amun Ptah, although hidden, is the source of all knowledge, all truth, and all wisdom. And I pray in what I share with you this evening that Amun Tehuti Owumila will be satisfied. It is ritual, and it is important to not disregard ritual, because ritual is the one instrument that human beings invented that allowed us to guarantee that the most important things in life will be internalized. The lecture, the discussion, the training all come after, and those are important instruments. But if it's something that's important, human beings, particularly our ancestors, relegated that to ritual. And I say that because one of the things I hope that will come out of my remarks this evening is that as we begin to reclaim our way, we look very seriously at this question of ritual. And that ritual is the thing that we need to be reinventing as we try to re-internalize the sense of being African. It is my responsibility to, in fact, introduce myself in a way that is required by the Orisha. And I have to do that by simply identifying that my mother, who was Annie Mae, and my father, who was John, named me Wade Nobles. And I believe they named me Wade Nobles because that word means something. Later on, we found in our family that the first African that we found as far back as we could go in our own family was this brother named Wade Nobles. And that, so I see that as part of a continuation. But when they explained to me my name, they explained to me that Wade was a word, was a concept that meant one who treads through difficult matter, like mud or snow or dirt or ignorance. And so the destiny is to engage in that trek. And that noble was in fact a character. And that noble is to have the character of high dignity, high quality, and esteemed character. And that everything I should do as a noble, as I tread through ignorance, is to do that with character and with dignity. And I am a devotee of Ifa, and I am a child of Orunmila. And Orunmila, the God of wisdom and intelligence, named me Ifa Bemi. Ifa Bemi means Ifa blesses me, and I have to listen to that voice. I am an Omo of Shango. Shango is the god of war and thunder. And Shango named me Shango Dari, which means Shango protects me. I need not fear anyone. Oruko mi ni, Ifa Bemi, Shango Dari. Oruko mi ni, Wai Nabila. Oruko mi ni, Kwaku Menza. Oruko mi ni, Wade Nobles. I bring you greetings from the National Association of Black Psychologists, where I have the privilege to serve as its National Director and President. I bring you greetings from the Department of Black Studies at the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University, and I bring you greetings from the Center for Applied Cultural Studies and Educational Achievement and the Institute for Advanced Study of Black Family Life and Culture, where I have the opportunity to think, hopefully deeply, about these issues and guided by the Orisha. I have entitled my remarks this evening, The Sacred Science of Healing, Reclaiming Our Tradition, because it is a quest that I believe is an important one, and I'm going to center it in part in the mandate that I am trying to charge black psychologists with, because I have decided, and with colleagues, to raise the question that we as black psychologists have in fact failed to do what we need to do in the service of our community, and it's time for us to take back that responsibility. And so in that context, I have begun to try to engage ourselves in a conversation. And in part, this conversation you will overhear. There's a conversation about this thing called African psychology and African psychologists and what are the issues that impact upon the functioning of our community. And it seems to me that some of that has to be by us having a conversation about some concepts, some notions that may help us to understand what is going on in our community. Because too often we see all this stuff, we see all this confusion, and we see all this thing that after a while we acclimate to it. I share with my students that sometimes, and it's a vulgar example, but it makes the point, that when you as a person go into your bathroom and you take the Ebony or the Jet or the newspaper and you sit there and you do what your natural bodily functions do, at the first moment you smell the funk. But as you turn to page 3 or 4 of the article, you eventually don't smell the funk anymore. You acclimate to the vulgar odor. And that in part, we as Africans have acclimated to the vulgarity of what it is to be in America. And we don't seem to sensitize it. We don't seem to understand it. And we begin to even blame ourselves for what's going on here. And we as black psychologists have been silent about this analysis. And I want to try to share with you some insights. The first insight is that we have to be driven by law. That as human beings, we don't just react. We are law-abiding. I don't mean the Constitution of the United States. I mean law-abiding in the African tradition, which is that the scholar, the scientist, the psychologist recognized that there was a divinely governed universe that was ruled by law, and that human behavior had to align itself with that law. And in that context, it seems to me that we as scientists have to begin to engage in reinventing law that represents the reality of African people. And one of the things that you do in inventing law is to lay out premises and concepts and principles that must not be violated. And I want to suggest to you that the notion of power is a principle that must not be violated. And by power, I simply mean and define for you that power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. That can't be violated. The problem for us in many ways is that we allow other people to define what it is to be African, and that we try to live out those illusions. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. And the most important reality to define is the meaning of your own human beingness. What does it mean to be African? What does it mean to be African in a non-African reality? How do we understand that? It seems to me that the law that emerges very quickly is a law of misknowing. First law. The law of misknowing. It comes from Neely Fuller's work, and it says that if you don't understand white supremacy, then everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. First law. If you don't understand white supremacy, then everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. Now that's a clear law, and it sort of resonates with it, but I would ask you to think deeply about it, because many things that we do is because we don't understand how white supremacy has infected us. And many of the things that we operate in, many of the things that we accept, and many of the things that we allow to happen in our community is because we have become white supremacists. We as Africans have become white supremacists. And so we do the bidding of white supremacy in our everyday lives. We sit in the seats of decision making and make decisions that are alien to the best interests of African people. We understand and ask questions about, well, what will the white folks think if I do this? What will my boss think if I do this? We allow them to give us these ideas about to love your own children is to be reverse racist. I mean, crazy things that we don't really think deeply about. So I suggest you hold on to this notion, this law of if you don't understand white supremacy, then everything else you think you know will simply confuse you. The second law, I'm not going to give you a lot of laws because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a psychologist. The second law is the law of non-being. This one I believe is more important than the law of misknowing. The law of non-being comes out of my own work, and it says, if you don't exist according to your African essence, then everything you think you are will be a diminishment. That if you don't exist according to your African essence, then everything that you think you are will be a diminishment. I'm the director this, the boss that, the important person this. But if you don't do all of that according to your African essence, then being the president of the university is a diminishment. Then being the director of community services is a diminishment. If you drive a bus and don't do it as an African, then driving that bus is a diminishment. And so we have to understand what the centrality and the importance of us understanding this thing called African really means, because it has to do with your absolute life and death. Asa Hilliard made a point that I think we should teach our children at birth. He said that the fundamental question for every single African in the world is to be African or not to be. There's no choice. You can't be non-African. You can't be African American. You can't be Afro. You can't be any of those things. The question is, either you are African or you are nothing. Now that's very deep. We have to think about that, because I've been doing pretty well here in the United States. I got a job, you know, I wear African clothes, I can do it, especially during Black History Month. I've kind of managed this stuff, I can work it. But the fact of the matter is that we have to begin to understand what that means and what are the forces that debilitated us, that moved us off of an appreciation, a profound and deep appreciation of our Africanity. And I'm arguing that that force, and I want to spend just a little time on this negative force before I try to talk about some strategies for our revitalization. I believe that that force comes out of Marimba Ani's work, who gave us an appreciation of a process and a concept called the Ma'afa. The Ma'afa, M-A-A-F-A. This is, I'm told, a class, so I would suggest you write it down. Ma'afa, M-A-A-F-A. It is a system of, it's a Kiswahili word, it's a system of disaster and death and destruction beyond human comprehension and convention. And that the forces of, and I'll just use this term for tonight, because you know who they are, the forces of evil, the forces of opposition to African people have engaged in a systematic process from the beginning of contact with us that was designed to destroy us, to debilitate us, to cause disaster in us. It is the Ma'afa. And the critical feature of the Ma'afa, is that it is premised on the denial of the humanity of African people. Now I want you to think about your own experiences, because while we like to and are inclined to look at historical moments and historical activities, think about your own experiences. Think about the many times in growing up in all different areas where somebody has what you thought was discriminating against you, where you had went to the University of Pittsburgh or went to some prestigious college and came back with your boom, gold card, and you thought you really was ready to have made it, and you went to do all this marketing in terms of your prestige, and someone walked over you, around you, behind you, and waited on someone else. Or someone followed you around the store because they thought you thought they were thinking that you might want to steal. But understand that the Ma'afa says that the African is less than human. And so the behaviors and the activities that are perpetrated against us are designed to make us believe that we are treated not with the respect of humanity. So a black child can go into a store, and the assumption that a black child will steal is not just some ignorance or some prejudice. It is an attempt to put in that black child's soul that they are less than human. It is radically important that we understand this notion of the Ma'afa. The Ma'afa is, in fact, brutal. We, in fact, know that for 100 years in this country, in America, for 100 years, every single day of the year, a black man or woman, and many black men and women were lynched in this country. Now, the historians like to talk about that lynching as just a moment of horror. But when you analyze the process, what you see is that the opposition, that white folks made the killing of black life a celebration. They had picnics around the lynching of black men. They ate barbecue at the destruction of the black men. They would brutalize the dead body of black men and bash out our teeth and take those teeth and string them together and put them around their baby girl children's neck as necklaces Now ask yourself, is this not beyond human comprehension and convention? What father would take the bloody teeth of a dead person and put them around their daughter as a necklace? They would pluck out the eyes of our bodies and put the eyeballs in little jars and give them to their girlfriends as love offerings. Is this not beyond human comprehension and convention? What kind of people would do this? But more importantly, what does it do to us? What does it say about their perception of us? There is one tale that I must tell you because it is important. I want to give this woman's name glory, the glory that it deserves. It is Mary Turner. Mary Turner was a regular, shown up, just plain sister. And in 1918, in Valdosta, Georgia, her husband was lynched, and she was 8 months pregnant. And the worry in her went to fight in protection of her husband who was being lynched. And these people, and I'm being polite, these people took Mary and strung her up by her feet and then proceeded to cut open her belly. And as the precious black baby fell to the ground, still attached to its mother by its sacred cord, the man took his boot and crushed its head. That is Ma'afa, because no human being could ever respond to another human being that way unless they define those humans as less than human. I could smash out the head of a dog. I can shoot my cow and kill it. I can run over a cat and not worry about it. So by relegating us to the less than human category, they in fact were committing this ma'afa. Now I put this word in this course because we have to recognize that we have this inclination to follow behind other people, and whatever they say they got, we just say we got the black version of that. And so we got black whatever. And there's some folk who want to talk about a black Holocaust. Please understand that the Holocaust was tragic. That no people should suffer the kind of trauma and torture that happened. But compared to the Ma'afa, the Holocaust is chump change. The Holocaust is not something that we need to shed tear about. We have enough in our own spirit to recall the pain that has occurred to us. That in fact there's been a systematic process of attempting to destroy the spirit of African people that we must understand as this concept of the Ma'afa, the ever-present, constant, and total disregard and disrespect for African life. Decisions are made every single day. Decisions about whether buses should go into the African community, whether postal service should happen in the African community, where a cab should drive in the African community, whether you should have a drugstore in your community. All these decisions are made, and people make those with a total abject disregard for African people. And we end up making the same decisions. And we end up saying, well, based upon the economy, we got to serve everybody. And we end up being fools in our own castles and don't understand that it is part of a systematic process of the Ma'afa. It is interesting that when we study our tradition just in this country, we see that this Ma'afa has predictable outcomes, and we can understand it. We can analyze it, and the value here is that once we understand how it works, we can reverse the process. And that's partly what we need to be moving to. But I want to share with you just a speech that I want to read, which I normally don't do, but it is important that I capture this without ad-libbing. It's a speech by a man named Willie Lynch in 1712. And it is reported that Willie Lynch is the person that we named lynching after, the concept of lynching. Willie Lynch was a consultant that was brought to the South to advise the Southerners about how to handle these Africans. And Willie Lynch's opening remarks are thusly. He said, "Gentlemen, I greet you on the bank of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with the slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still oldest methods of controlling the slave. Ancient Rome would be proud and envy of my program if implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named after our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish. I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along the old highways in great numbers, you are using the tree and the rope on occasion. I caught a whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprising. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the field too long for maximum profit. This is clearly a businessman. You suffer occasional fires and your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. I'm here to introduce to you two methods of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you, if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. I pause and say 1712, 1812, 1912, 2012. 300 years. My method is simple, and members of your family and every overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for controlling purposes. Think about how we operate in our own community. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take the simple little list of differences and think about them. On the top of my list is age. It is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shades. There is intelligence, size, sex, size of plantation, status of plantation, attitude of owner, whether the slave lives in the valley, on a hill, east, west, north, south, has fine hair or coarse hair, is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than respect or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black versus the young black. The old black male versus the young black male. The young black male versus the old black male. You must pit the dark-skinned slave against the light-skinned slave, and the light-skinned slave against the dark-skinned slave. You must use the female against the male, and the male against the male. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend only on you. They must love you, they must respect you, and they must trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them and use them wisely. Have your wives use them. Have your children use them. Never miss an opportunity to use them. My plan is a guarantee. And the good thing about this plan is that if you intensely use it for just 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Guaranteed to work. 1712. These folk have not been playing with us. We still trying to get on their good side. We still trying to figure out how can we integrate. The plan has not changed. From 1712, the plan has not changed, and we need to understand what it does for us, what it causes, how it causes us to operate. It was an attack not just on management and behavioral control, it was an attack on removing us from our culture. You see, because culture is the critical ingredient here. Culture has always been attacked. African culture, at least the manifestations of African culture, have always been attacked and made illegal, because that then allows them to pit those who appear to be African against those who are not African, to pit those who are short, tall, dark, light. All those things that we are suffering from today are systematic. but it is an attack on the culture that you need to understand. Not just, well, if I can just maybe tell my kids don't marry no light-skinned women, we can blacken the race, we'll take away. That's not it. The issue here is a question of culture. And I try to point out to my own students that culture is the humans, as water is the fish. It is essential. The fish do not run around saying, I can take water or leave it. I'm not really into a water thing. See, fish don't do that. Fish understand that the water is everything. It is critical. It is pervasive. It is also invisible. But the fish aren't aware of the water. The fish don't swim around saying, oh, I'm in water, oh, I'm in water. The water's hot, the water's cold, oh, the water's muddy. Fish don't do that. But if you take the fish out of the water, fish got problems. Did I unplug something? Yeah, let's see, I respect electricity. So I'm not going to back into this till we can get closer here. I'm sorry, brother, I moved you up, but we can get closer. The fish don't trip on this water, but you take them out of it, fish have strange reactions. You take the water fish eyes start buckling, and fins start flapping, and lips start jumping all over the place, almost looking like he's on crack cocaine. Think about it. Being out of the water. And if you take a certain kind of fish, like saltwater fish, and take the saltwater fish and put it in freshwater fish, the fish has to make adjustments. And that is important because the fish has to acclimate to this new cultural milieu. The saltwater fish in saltwater has habits, has behavior, does certain things that are predictable as a saltwater fish. Saltwater male fish, for instance, that are in saltwater will walk or swim with a certain kind of rhythm, will have a certain kind of attitude that says, I'm a saltwater fish. We'll talk amongst the brothers of saltwater fish and say, looking down the stream and seeing a sister swimming and say, based upon the rhythm of her fins, I can tell that's a sister saltwater fish. They can tell about that. Saltwater fish will get together and they will come together with their lips almost touching and talking to each other and doing this kind of motion back and forth. And you listen very carefully, you hear the brother saltwater fish say, baby, you so fine, God must have been showing off when he made you. Saltwater fish men know that there's a certain way. The point of making the saltwater fish know in their own natural milieu, there's a certain way in which you're supposed to respond to women and women respond to men. There's a sense of appropriateness that is tied to that. But take that saltwater fish out of the salt water and put them in fresh water, and things begin to change. The color of the saltwater fish begins to change. Saltwater fish are very colorful. They're big, they have flowing fins. Some people would say the fins are almost nappy, they're so curly. The saltwater fish has a certain rhythm. The saltwater fish hangs out in schools and does certain kinds of things. Take the saltwater fish and put them in fresh water, and things begin to change. Saltwater fish begin to engage in strange behavior. We can only call it strange because we're not familiar enough with it to categorize it properly. But it is strange behavior. You see a saltwater fish start saying things like, they don't like looking like saltwater fish. Saltwater fish start saying, as soon as I get a job, I'm going to go down there to the drugstore and get me some blue contact lenses. Saltwater fish say, you know, these fins just are hard to manage. I think that it's more convenient for me if I have a saltwater fish jerry curl. Or if I get some saltwater fish extensions, because then I can do several things with it. Saltwater fish start talking about, I think I need to have to give me a bleaching scale cream and try to get all this color out the scales. Saltwater fish start saying, well, you know, I've been to the saltwater fish University of Pittsburgh, and I just don't like that saltwater fish food. There's something about it. It's too rich for my system. You know, I don't know why. It's poor food. It's poor fish food. I can afford better food than that. Saltwater fish start saying, well, you know, I want to live in the freshwater fish neighborhood. It seems to me that the freshwater fish neighborhoods are clean and the water's better, and I can find the ferns easier in the freshwater fish neighborhood. I think I want to go to the suburbs of the pond. Saltwater fish start saying, you know, I believe that the saltwater fish have low saltwater fish self-esteem. We need to think about what to do with this. Saltwater fish is a strange behavior. Saltwater fish start saying, well, you know, the problem here is that there's too many saltwater fish having teenage pregnancy, and we need to do something about that. That's the problem. These saltwater mamas are not raising their children to just say no. You start listening to the saltwater fish men. Saltwater fish men start saying some strange things too. Saltwater fish men begin to say, you know, I think them freshwater fish women are prettier than the saltwater fish women. You know, I'm here on campus and in the university, and I work downtown in the industrial center, and I understand that the freshwater fish women are better able to satisfy my needs. That they don't hassle me as much as the saltwater fish women, and that the freshwater fish women seem to be more sexually liberated and are able to do things that saltwater fish women would not even imagine doing. Saltwater fish women begin to sound strange and make strange behavior. You listen to them and they start saying, well, these saltwater fish men, they shiftless, they violent, they rude, they don't understand how to treat a woman. They are no good. In fact, I've been telling my babies that they're no good just like they saltwater fish daddy. I want to tell my daughters, don't count on them saltwater fish men. You have to recognize that these boys are going to grow up to be no good dog fish, that they can't be trusted. They begin to talk about your no good saltwater fish daddy left me, and you ain't going to be nothing but a no good saltwater fish, a dog fish as well. Tell the girls, you can't trust none of them saltwater fish men. You better listen, girlfriend. You better go for yourself, girlfriend. And if they start talking that stuff, you ask them quickly, what have you done for me lately? So you start hearing this strange conversation going on with the fish. Middle-class saltwater fish have been around long enough to get an education and get a job, start talking about, we got to attack these other saltwater fish. See, I'm a saltwater fish conservative, and that I, in fact, have raised myself up by my fin straps, and that I, in fact, don't want no affirmative action program for me that's an insult to me, that they need to, them other fish need to pick themselves up by their gill straps. They need to stop getting on welfare. It's an embarrassment that all the saltwater fish are on welfare. The middle class begin to start talking about we need to stop blaming freshwater fish supremacy and really take responsibility for the problems that are in our community, and that we need to be opposed to affirmative action programs. The middle class saltwater fish begin to take pride in not being saltwater fish. They stand up and say, I am a fish. I am a fish. Don't want to be referred to as a saltwater fish. Say, you call me a saltwater fish, that limits me. I'm not a saltwater fish poet. I'm not a saltwater fish psychologist. I'm not a saltwater fish author. I can't be limited by the constraints of salt water. They begin to talk about we need to get hired in these freshwater conservative freshwater think tanks, and they begin to make analysis about the condition in the African community that sounds very much like the freshwater mentors that they've been trained by. But they take pride in the fact that they are there and they're the only ones. In education, you begin to see some strange things. Saltwater community begins to say, wait a minute, there are more saltwater fish males who are going to freshwater fish prisons than are going to freshwater fish colleges. Something's not right. Wait a minute. We wonder why the saltwater fish don't do so well on the freshwater fish IQ test. Maybe there's something wrong with the saltwater fish, making this strange kind of analysis. Saltwater fish boys particularly begin to act up in class, begin to disrespect themselves and disrespect all adult fish, begin to wear their scales all down low behind their fins, and begin to walk with swim with their fins all untied, and they go wearing caps all backwards around their head. And we start seeing this strange behavior. We can't understand this. There's no category for it. Saltwater fish teachers begin to blame the poor educational performance on the saltwater fish children, as opposed to the freshwater fish schools where these saltwater fish children are forced to go. You hear the best and the brightest of the saltwater fish teachers saying things like, these fish can't learn. They can't learn because they come from saltwater fish projects. They can't learn because their saltwater fish mamas on welfare. They can't learn because their saltwater fish daddies in jail. They can't learn because their saltwater grandmamas on crack cocaine. They can't learn because there's too many saltwater fish guppies having guppies. They can't learn because there are no role models, no saltwater fish role models who can demonstrate freshwater fish success. Saltwater fish community says, wait a minute, Saltwater fish seem to be the last hide and first fire. Maybe something strange here. Saltwater fish that's saying, well, I think we need a saltwater fish civil rights movement. We need to begin to picket and try to get into these places and get these jobs. And we need to figure out how we can get some saltwater fish elected to the mayorship and are successful in that struggle and find out that as soon as the fresh saltwater fish is elected to the freshwater fish cities, they are given to them when they are beyond repair. The saltwater fish cities are laden with crime, have high unemployment. The infrastructure of the environment is in decay. There is no economic base. And people say this is an example of the success of the saltwater fish civil rights movement because we have saltwater fish mayors in these cities, but they can't do anything better. Saltwater fish boys begin to engage in things called drive-by shootings. Saltwater fish boys begin to rape and plunder and victimize their community. And the saltwater fish begin to say, we need more police. We need more prisons. See, this is strange behavior. We can understand this behavior. This is strange behavior, but because we're humans and we have a little bit more intelligence than fish, we recognize that the problem here is that these fish are acting strange because they're out of their culture. They're out of their milieu, and if you wanted to help the saltwater fish, you would simply put some salt in the water. If you want to help, the strange behavior of African people, you must Africanize our time in space. We have to think through, how do we put some salt in the water? How do we put some Africa in the space, in the time? Because the results of this on a human level, being out of our culture, out of our milieu, is predictable. We can see it in our streets. We see in ourselves the results of not being in our culture. Depression. Black people feel bad. And we feel bad a lot. We don't talk, but we feel bad a lot. And in fact, it's almost only 2 times a week do we not feel bad. Friday night after work, we go to Slim Jenkins, or Sunday morning at 11 o'clock when we ask for the Lord to please come in here and help us. You know, but other than that, every other time of the week, we feel bad. Now, we should not live that way. We need to look at that. That's an indicator. That's symptomatic of being out of our culture. There's alienation. There's racial rejection. Black folk running from being black, trying not to be black, trying to talk not like black, to be like, walk like, talk like, look like, act like somebody else, and taking pride to the degree that we accomplish that closeness to someone else. There's racial rejection, self-negation, gender confusion, cultural denigration, the things that are our cultural aesthetic, we begin to take for granted or even disregard. Don't even support our artists, don't support our traditions. Jazz has absolutely become an American music because only white Americans support it. Now, we need to look at ourselves there. This is our creative geniuses, and you go to a jazz concert, you see you and your wife. And everybody else is sort of other folk. So we need to look at that because that's a critical symptom of we not having salt in our water. Mental illness, drug addiction, alcoholism, poverty, ignorance, all symptomatic of this despiritualization, this removal from our culture. A sense of hopelessness. Now, I want to make a point that we have never had an experience of time when we as adults can walk in our community and look in our children's eyes and don't see excitement. I mean, no matter how hard it got, adults would always see the possibility of a future and the excitement of our children's eyes. Our children's eyes are foggy because there is hopelessness. And we're in a dangerous place. And as part of this, my offer, what I want to argue with you is that the intent of making us less than human is working. And we need to understand this, my offer, and look at that. Helplessness, believing that we can't do. I mean, we've never had that tradition. Black folk would say, well, I'm just going to go to bed and go to sleep and get up and try it one more time. And just get up and figure out, or I'm going to steal me some money, get me a ticket, and go back home. And just be back home down south for a while I figure out how to do it again. But we would never have this pervasive sense of helplessness, homelessness, symptomatic of people who have lost their humanity. Never in our history did black folk ever conceptualize in our minds that we did not have a home. We could always find somebody that knocking on their door let us in for home. We got black folks now thinking that the best thing they could do is start a black people's homeless union, because white folks have a white people's homeless union, and that we need to have that because that's our solution. We never did that. Things got real bad in Pittsburgh. We would simply get up and going back down to Birmingham, going back down to Macon, and hang out on the farm until we could get it together, and then try it again. We always had a home, because the icon of our humanity was Mama's kitchen table. That we could always go back to Mama's kitchen table, and we could always sit there and talk it through, come up with solutions. We've lost Mama's kitchen table. We've lost the instinct to believe that we can go back, and we really haven't lost it. I don't make this worse than it is, because we sort of forgotten it. I don't want y'all to go away real and say, oh, let's throw the towel. I don't want you to do that. Be careful here. But we've forgotten some of the things that make us African people. This notion of homelessness is one of them. Apathy, anger, hostility, spousal abuse, the abuse of one's parents. I mean, this stuff is strange behavior. I mean, there was a time when you thought it, your mama would simply say, that's right. Don't even think it. You thinking, well, I can take them. And your father would say, look, my black suit is right there in the closet. Don't let me have to go put my black suit on. Because we understood that there was a certain connection there that was real. But now we have violence in our own families. That are liberties that our children are taking that was never allowed in our culture. And these symptoms we need to recognize as part of the problem of having no salt in the water. Black on black crime, all the families dysfunctioning. We have the horrible evidence of black men actually having sex with their own daughters. Never before, never in our tradition. Taking someone else's culture, taking someone else's attitude and believing that. Even if a brother went crazy back in the day and did that, the men folk would simply solve the problem. And the problem was solved because people say, where is Moses? You seen Moses? You know, and after a while, people just stopped talking about Moses because the problem was solved. Now, see, we had a way of doing things that were tied to what is allowable, what is appropriate, what is inappropriate. But as we follow other people, we chase gods not our own, we take on their pathologies. As we begin to model them, we take on their pathologies. We need to understand that there are systems here that are doing that to us. This rampant individualism, symptomatic of being out of our culture. No sense of community, symptomatic of being out of our culture. Taking on the attitude of survival of myself. I'm taking care of myself, symptomatic of being out of our culture. Fear, distrust, and disunity, lack of direction, going for oneself. All those are symptomatic of being out of our community. Being a successful servant of white people and reaping millions of dollars, and white people then turning on you and setting you up, and then pumping into the minds of all black people that if OJ could not get away, how you expect to get away? If OJ, who we created, we will destroy. And that's not even making any assessment of whether the blood was guilty or not. The fact of the matter is that there's a message here. And the message here is that every single black man is a criminal. Every single black man is a criminal. And every single day of the year, we're going to pump that into the minds and the mentality of black children. As psychologists, we are now hearing, this is horrible, we're hearing young black boys having nightmares, dreaming that they are O.J. Simpson and they are killing people. You see what's happening to our community? We're not looking at this. That's amazing. That's horrible that our children are internalized because every single day they're pumped in with the fact that if you're a black man, you're a criminal. I want to point out to you that only twice in the history of America has America shut itself down on a single issue. The first time was with Nat Turner. When Nat Turner had the vision and decided that God said, it's time to stop. And they decided they had to find that black man. The entire United States shut down No other news, no other activity, no other comment was being made other than we got to catch Nat Turner. When they thought O.J. Simpson was escaping in that white Bronco, no other idea in this country was allowed. Ask yourself what that means. That it was more important, the fall of Russia, the meltdown of nuclear factories, nothing else was more important in the psyche of America than that we must catch that black man that tells you how strong you are.
That's right.
That tells you how powerful you are. When the most powerful nation in the world will shut down every other possibility in order to catch you, that says our power. But as long as we act like them, we are harmless. They understand that they had to, in fact, use this opportunity to brainwash us into believing that we have great debates. Great debates. Is O.J. innocent? Is O.J. guilty? And all black people talking, I don't know, maybe blood went off. I don't know, maybe he did it. I don't know, man. It seems like he was bought from some killers to do that better. I don't know, maybe some drugs. We have all this discussion, but it's all centered around not a black man who has demonstrated excellence. Not the fact that we have black men and women who are astronauts. Not the fact that we have black men who are physicists and black men who are neurosurgeons. We don't have this long discussion about them. We have long discussions about whether a black man committed a crime. That's intentional. The intent here is to internalize in our minds Esfet. Esfet, an ancient Kemet. There are two central concepts. One is called Ma'at, and Ma'at represents truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, propriety, and order. But the descendant tendency that the ancients talked about was called Esfet. And Esfet is disorder, disease, disunity, destruction, disruption, deterioration, and death. And if you can focus African mind on Esfet, then all we do is reproduce that which we think about. See, ideas are the substance of behavior. Ideas are the substance of behavior. That's why it is absolutely psychological suicide when we allow our young men and women to engage in this rap phenomena that has been vulgarized.
That's right.
So they refer to each other as B's and N's and A's and stuff, because those are Esfet. Those are Esfet, and we don't understand that the inspiration for the rap music came as a positive continuation of the griot tradition. The orator who gives commentary on the condition. And there's been a systematic, intentional process to vulgarize that. So if you just make it more nasty, you get more sales. And because eldership did not take the responsibility to counsel our children, they made decisions about those things on their own. And as children, they made wrong decisions, because children do that. And so now we have a phenomena of negative gangster raps that are talking about the absolute what? Disrespect, destruction, disruption, primarily of the feminine principle. Do you realize that the feminine principle is the single most icon that represents the will of God? And if you destroy the thing that represents the will of God, you absolutely eliminate yourself from the community of humanity. This stuff is intentional. This stuff is intentional. We need to understand that Esfet is in the land. Esfet is in the land, and we have to figure out how to change that. I argue that we change that by reclaiming our tradition. We have to reclaim our tradition as healers. We have to ask the question, who do we belong to? And who belongs to us? Who do we belong to? And who do we belong to us? I simply remind you an obvious fact that we never think about. When our ancestors, our immediate ancestors were kidnapped and killed and stolen from Africa, not a single one, there's not a recorded instance where our ancestors said, I am giving you my Africanness. Not a single African said, I am going to sell you my ancestral connection. Not a single African said, hold this in escrow till I get back. Not a single African said, I don't want it no more. that all of our ancestors left Africa as Africans. They left Africa as Africans, and in fact, they did not give it up, they did not loan it, they did not sell it, they did not denounce it, they did not lose it, they did not throw it away. White folks simply have us believing. Power is the ability to define reality and to have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. And so they took us and said, you are now Negroes. You are now colored people. You are now black Anglo-Saxons. You are now Afropeans. You are now anything. And ultimately, you are simply human beings. You are individuals. And we say, okay. We say, okay, not realizing that we're giving up the fundamental thing about who we belong to and what belongs to us. In this room right here, there are the Bantu. There are the Wolof. There are the Mandingo. There are the Malinka. There are the Bambara. There are the Fulani. There are the Limba, the Bola, the Balanti, the Timba, the Mindi, the Vai, the Dai, the Gola, the Kissi, the Bassa, the Krebo, the Yoruba. Right in this room. Right in this room. And we need to realize that ancestral connection was not broken. That ancestral connection and the right to ancestry was not broken. We can call upon that. We can awaken it in ourselves. And that's the task for, I believe, the black psychologists. We must be responsible for helping our community to reawaken that spirit, to reawaken and understand the philosophies and the procedures that allowed us to do the great things that we did in the past. But it is not simply a call for back in the day when we were kings and queens. We don't need to know that, really. We don't need to know that there was this multi-talented genius named Imhotep. We don't need to know that. What we need to know is what did Imhotep's mama and daddy do to produce Imhotep. That's what we need to know. We don't need to know. We don't need to know that there was this black man named Shaka Zulu. We need to know that there was a community that raised him up to understand that he will die rather than somebody invade his land and his culture. See, that's what we need to know. We need to understand the spirit that is in the African. Because that spirit, once it's awakening, we can stop what we're doing. Because wherever we place ourselves, we will Africanize that moment. We need to figure out how do we get back to understanding and reawakening the African spirit. I believe part of that is reclaiming our philosophy and our analysis. In the ancient times, some people argue 40,000 years before the birth of Christ, black men and women began to conceptualize what it meant to be human. And in that period, we came up with what the Arabs later on called the philosophy of the alchemical process of transformation to perfectibility. Long words, a lot of language. The alchemical process of transformation to perfectibility. The Arabs said that we were engaged in alchemy. I want to make a point for you. When the Greeks looked at our stuff, they took this alchemy and said, yeah, this alchemy is an attempt to make a base material into a more valuable material. That alchemy was about changing lead into gold. That was the task. But these were affirmative action children. They didn't quite understand the depth of our teaching. You see, they came to us really as an attempt for us to try to educate the retarded. And we need to recognize that because they didn't get the lesson well. Our lesson said that the alchemical process was a transformation from a lesser material being to a greater, higher spiritual being. That we, in fact, are God on earth. But it has to be a process of transformation. It has to be a process of transcendence. And as Africans, our ancestors said that there is law, divine law, and that the fundamental law of the universe, the divine law, the single most important law is to be. No other law. The most important law is to be. Now we can think in our own context, and that makes sense. Because if you don't be, it don't be. There's nothing else that can happen. So to be is the most primary, most primitive, most important base law. But our ancestors also said that every law has a moral mandate. Every law has a requirement of its fulfillment. And that the moral mandate for the divine law of to be was to become better, to ascend, to be better, to be, if you will, more better. That the law was that you be and you must be more better. You be in every capacity, but you must fulfill the moral mandate of being more better. Now look at black folk. Look at what we do. Whatever is the activity that folks say we can't do, that we are not allowed to do, as soon as we get in it, what do? We do it more better. We do it more better. I love, because I work in a historical white university, I love pointing out to classes that it was white genius, unashamedly white genius, that sat on a farm somewhere in New England and imagined something that was never done before. That's genius. You take something that never happened and you create anew, the unknown, and make it known. And this white man imagined something. He took this apple crate and broke open the bottom and nailed it up on the wall and took some rags and balled them up and started shooting those rags into the basket. That became a game called basketball. And this is a white man's game. And it is rule governed. The rules is that you bounce the ball, stop, set, shoot. Bounce the ball, stop, set, shoot. Bounce the ball, stop, set, shoot. And you look up to see that the ball goes into the hoop and you get, intellectually, 2 points. And you can say, therefore, by nomological deductive reasoning, I did good. That's what people do. And somewhere along the line, some black men got in the game. And the coach said, here's the game. You bounce the ball, you stop, set, shoot. You bounce the ball, stop, set, shoot. And the brother took the ball and he did it one time. He bounced the ball, stop, set, shoot. Then he took the ball and put it to his feet. Took the ball and walked on air backwards and threw the ball in the hoop and walked away, slapping hands and never even looked. That is the best example of we can do it more better. But it's not just in sports. It's not just in sports. It is in science. It is in science as well. Do you realize that what's the brother who did the peanuts? George Washington Carver. Everybody likes to report that George Washington Carver made thousands of discoveries with the peanuts. And his white colleagues asked him, brother, how did you do it? Let me see your lab books. Let me see your write-ups. Let me see your analysis. And George Washington Carver said, I get up in the morning, early in the morning, just before the sun comes up, and I walk out in the woods, and the plants tell me what they can do. That's more better. That's more better. That is connecting that spirit that says that spirit and divine governing law is us. It is the same law that allowed us to wake up and say we can build a pyramid, not as a monument to my ego, but as a material manifestation that parallels my spirit.
That's right.
See, the pyramid is simply a token that says this represents who I am, that the spirit is eternal, that it is permanent. So we didn't build for Saturday night.
That's right.
We didn't think about, are we going to have a summer project? We didn't think about, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Our ancestor says, I am what I be. And if I be, I must be more better. And as long as I'm being more better, I might as well build forever.
That's right.
It's not just chump change stuff. That we have to build for better. And those transformations then become things that we can take back. See, the ancients is not just, again, ego tripping about black folk going back in the day when we were doing it. We need to look at that as a template, as a model that allows us to begin to see what we can do. What were the transformations? The transformations from a lesser material being to a greater spiritual meaning. Transformations from chaos to order. From disharmony to harmony, from ignorance to intellect, from darkness to enlightenment, from humanity to divinity. Transformations from finite to eternity. That's our stuff. And we sit here wondering about little chump change stuff. You see, and it's because we black psychologists have not done our job. We have not provided the analysis. We have not looked at the fact that in that process of becoming more better, that all living things have some attributes that we can now work with. We can work with raising these children. That all living things have desire, thought, and action. All living things. That's why we can talk to the plants. Because the plant has desire. The plant desires to fulfill its destiny. Humans have desire. And the desire is to fulfill our destiny. Plants have thought. They think. That's why you can talk to them, because they think. Plants also have action. They have a path a purpose in their life. Humans have the same thing. We have desire, thought, and action. But I want to suggest to you that desire, thought, and action are low level. They're the lesser material condition. The higher spiritual condition has to be developed through what? Education and child rearing, through the development of the next generation. Desire becomes perfected when it becomes pure love. Think about the difference. In desire, I see sisters. Desire just as I see them thighs. That's where it's at. And she looked at me just long enough for me to believe that she liked me. Actually, she was looking to see who's coming in the back door, but I thought she looked at me. That's the confusion of black men. But she does it. But I see her hair, I see her look, I see the little cute face, I see all this desire. And I'm thinking about, the sister as a material being. But if we did our job right, the brother would not look at the sister as this material that he desires, but he would engage in what the ancestors called pure love. And pure love is the highest spiritual condition wherein I see in her exactly what I see in myself. I want in her exactly what I want for myself. In fact, when I wake up in the morning, looking at her gives me the inspiration to believe that I can go beyond what I thought was my limitations. That's pure love. That's pure love. But we have to teach that. We have to work with that. See, thought is also a low level. We talk in the university about critical thinking being the highest level of development, and that Aristotle and Socrates were the masters at this. But the fact of the matter is that thought is a mid-level functioning. The African says, the ancestor says that we think, and we have to move thought to a higher level. I'm thinking. I see the sister. I desire her. I say, brother, man, tell the sister that I work for the governor. Let's set this shit up here. Tell her I work for the government because I'm thinking about how I'm going to get over. Or tell her that I'm from Africa. She's one of the Nubian sisters. Tell her I'm from Africa. We try to set this up, so we're thinking all kinds of this scheming thing. But the African says that the thinking is low level. You have to move from thinking to clear understanding. Yes. Clear understanding is when you comprehend both the intent and the consequence of what you do. It's what your grandmama did. Or your mama did when she said, I don't know, it don't set right. Something don't feel right. I got to go out, Mama. I want to go out. Mama didn't say, well, baby, we live here in Boston, and Boston is an urban metropolis, and it is now 4:45, and based upon being 4:45, I can predict that people will be getting off their jobs and they'll be working in the increase of motor traffic in the street will increase by 5-fold, and I will predict at a point of 0.5 degrees of freedom that you may stray off into the street, and the probability of you getting hit is at the 0.35 level, and therefore I conclude with proper nomenological deductive reasoning that you should not go out. All right. Mama didn't do that. She said, baby, it don't feel right. Something ain't right here. Something ain't right here, because she plugged into the clear understanding. It's the same thing that happens all the time in our community. When folks, I've been thinking about Moses. I've been thinking about Job. And you call way back to Birmingham. And sure enough, 100% of the time, something extraordinary happened to Moses. Something extraordinary happened to Job. Because that's that tied into the spirit. That's that connection that we give up because we're swimming in fresh water. We give up because we think that that's not real. That's not scientific. That is clear understanding, but we have to teach that. We have to help our children understand that that is a law that they can benefit from. Action is also low level. We come through our mother's sacred womb, acting, moving, doing, touching our lips, feeling our eyes, wondering, looking all over the place. That's movement. But the ancestors said that is low-level stuff. That the higher level, the moving to the higher level of spirit is when you engage in acts of service and sacrifice that benefit the whole. Doing for self is low level. It is when you are a human being. When you are a human being, and if you study African languages, it's amazing that Africans have terms that represent you are not a being. You are a non-being. And many of us would qualify as non-beings because we've given up the higher level functioning. The higher level function says that in what I do, it is an act of service and sacrifice to benefit the whole. And I like to parallel Malcolm and Martin as this example, because both men come from, in quote, those class differences. Martin was from middle class, well-to-do, in fact had cash, had cultural cash, meaning that he was the son of the richest, biggest preacher in the black community. That's cultural cash, meaning that everybody would simply look away if he did wrong. That's Reverend Martin's boy. Don't say nothing about, don't you say nothing about that. He could do all kinds of, but that community, that family created something in him that he grew up believing that his life was dedicated, in spite of what you learned from so-called FBI, that his life was dedicated to service and sacrifice to benefit black people. He could have simply sat back and waited, took his drop-top BMW of the time, which was a 57 Chevrolet convertible. He could have took his father's allowance and he could have ran through all of those systems and acted like the heathen that some of us act like. But he, in fact, engaged in that his life was dedicated to service and sacrifice to benefit the whole. Everyone knows that Malcolm went through transformation. Malcolm was a thug, was a criminal, was a crook, was leeching on his community. And that, in fact, when he went through prison, he somehow got in conversation with God. Got in conversation and began to engage in a transformation where Malcolm came out saying, I do not want to own anything. I don't want to be required to protect any property because it is not about property. It is about service and sacrifice to benefit my people. And each of those men gave their very lives into the higher level, but they haven't been arrived. Many of us are dying and not even arrived. If you're going to die, at least arrive and be at the higher level. Yeah, but we just give it up at the lower level. It is this notion of spiritness then that I want to argue is the critical factor. Spiritness, not spirituality, not religion, even though I believe that all of us should have some formalized process of connecting to the divine, of retying ourselves to the divine. That's what religion is. Religament, to reconnect, to retie to the divine. So I believe we all should have that, but the issue that I want to talk about now is not that process of religion or religament, not that process of having the quality of being spiritual, but the process or the character of actually being a spirit. We are spirit. We are energy. We are power. We are force. That's what we are. And when we tie into that, we have no limitations. When we tie into that spiritness, we have no limitations. That's the reclamation that the black psychologist needs to be having conversation about. That's the therapeutic intervention that we need to be crafting as we work with our community to awaken the spirit. You see, the African healer was in fact someone who engaged in simply that, waking up the spirit. The African healer understood that there was being, becoming, and belonging. That when you be, you in fact have the essence of the substance. You can't be unless you have the essence of the substance of that attribute of the divine. Doesn't matter what you call them. All the names I introduced my remarks with were names of the divine. So don't let that get in our way. That's what Willie Lynch said. If I can get the Muslims to believe that they're different from the Christians, to believe they're different from whatever, then I got it made. And it will last for what? 1,000 years. So don't get into that. We need to recognize that it is the spiritness that is in us. It is being. To be means to have the attribute of the divine. All the netches that are in ancient Kemet were simply attributes of the divine. Netches are what? Nature.
That's right.
Nature. So what is our nature? Our nature is to have the attribute of God. And we need to manifest and present that attribute in a way that ushers us to what? Be more better. Becoming is a continuous process, a continuous constant process of achievement, of actualization. So as we start talking about how we raise our children, we should be conscious about the process of becoming. How do we raise our children so they become more better? Our mothers and grandmothers know how to do this.
That's right.
They would look at the baby, look at the child and say, this baby got this kind of skill. You better give this baby these kinds of experiences. That baby got talent. They would just look at him and pull out of the child. Whereas we run around here trying to get, Rorschachs and IQ tests and all these scales and assess and trying to get white folks to tell us that our child is gifted. Oh Lord, please be gifted, not be no idiot. And they say, no, your child's an idiot. That we get all crazy and mad about this stuff. We don't understand what's going on because we are off our what? Center. We're off our culture. We can't see. We act strangely. We act strangely because we don't understand that there's no salt in our water. But this becoming is a continuous process. And we engage in things. It wasn't accidental that our communities in the church made sure that children had opportunity to engage in orature. that you had to get up and say something. You had to get up and what nothing but Jesus wept. And you struggled with that. You had to do that because our folk had this resonance. See, there's resonance here. And they, even though they couldn't explain it as in Afrocentric terms, they had an understanding that our children had to have mastery of the word, of nomo, of the power of the word. That if you could say it, if you could express it, you could make it manifest. And so we gave ourselves opportunities in the church, at family picnics. When company came, baby, come here and do this dance, come here and do this dance. All those things were not, you know, we thought we were being imposed on by them. But there was what? Science behind it. See, there was law behind it. And because we behavioral scientists were too busy trying to understand European stuff, we didn't have eyes to see. We didn't have eyes to understand the law that was right there in our own communities, but it ain't lost. We can take it back. Belonging, state of being. Belonging, we have to raise up these concepts. Being and becoming and belonging are important things for us to contemplate about, to think about. What does it mean to belong to somebody? What happens, and I've made an argument that the difference in those one-room schoolhouses that had K through 12 and an old sister who taught everybody how to read is that sister believed that every single one of them belonged to her. It wasn't about you, someone else's child. You, in this room, you are my child. And you're going to sit your black ass down here and you're going to learn how to read. And we had that attitude. You see, that's the point I want you to realize, that there was a connection that was spirit. It was not just, you know, the union contract says I can only have 13 contact hours beyond the workday with a child. It was about that you belong to me and that you're going to get this. That notion of belonging is an important one for us to take back. To take back the attitude that this community belongs to us. That the Jegna in East Africa has the responsibility of protecting the land, the culture, and the people. We should be talking about that responsibility. How many black men and women here need to take the attitude that this here belongs to us? That each of these children in this auditorium belongs to each and every one of us. How much of that is lost? There was a time when we would simply all get together in the congregation and take up special collections so that Hattie Mae's boys can go down there to Morehouse, or Sister Mary's daughter can go to Spelman. And people had no problem with doing that because that child belonged to the church, belonged to the community. Now we can't get people to raise, right? You know, she should not have left her husband. He was working good over in the steel mill. I didn't tell her to get no divorce. I ain't giving no. We come up with all kinds of excuses for not doing because we are what? We are becoming transformed. We are becoming salt, freshwater fish. We're not realizing that it is our sacred responsibility to engage in a science that is about the expansion, the elevation, the ascension of the human spirit. And again, in my own work, I suggest that what we call black psychology has to move away from that. That we probably shouldn't even call ourselves psychologists. That's too new now. And for a while, we're going to be still it. But the fact of the matter is that the ancients, long before Freud's mother thought about Freud, long before Greek philosophy, which was the armchair system of thinking that emerged and evolved into psychology, Africans contemplated a deep thought. That in fact, our tradition is to have deep thought and high culture. Deep thought and high culture. And that in that deep thought and high culture, we understood, the Merrill Lectures teaches us, that there was a process of understanding, of illuminating the eye, the soul of the being, to understand that which inspires. And our ancestors called it the saku, the illumination of the spirit. And that there were people who were involved in this deep and profound thought that went deeply into the subject, studied it profoundly, searched the magical books for understanding, and penetrated phenomena deeply, and they were called the Shetists. I'm offering for my colleagues that we should begin calling ourselves Saku Shetists. That we should be the people. We should be the people that are responsible for engaging in profound, deep, penetrating analysis that leads to the illumination of the human spirit. That's the Saku Shetists. We have to grapple with this notion of the spirit. We have to understand that the spirit is the energy, the force, the power that is both the inner essence and the outer envelope of everything. That we are connected to everything. That our spiritness is that which serves to ignite and to enliven us. And that we see ourselves as dull and damp and quiet is because the spirit has been quieted, that the Bunsen burner has been cut off. That we have to begin to look at the human being experiences their spiritness as both a metaphysical state in an ethereal extension, all the way connecting the phenomena of the super world of the deities, the Orisha, the interworld of other beings, and the intra-world of ourselves. That we have to see all those things as the domain that we operate in. That this spiritness can in fact be experienced, expressed, and we see it every single day. It is the spiritness that is experienced as the urge or the desire for what is excellent and good. Ask yourself the question, why are black people attracted to the best? In a capitalist society, they work us on that. They sell us stuff that we don't need. But the fact of that is there is an inspiration, there is an essence that we are attracted to, the good, the best, that we just don't do it halfway. That even on those holidays when black men are given their responsibility for baking turkey, brothers sit there and talk to the turkey. A little brand, you're doing all right, Mr. Turkey. Mr. Turkey, come on, Mr. Turkey, get it right. Look at them ladies, you're doing all right, you're spelling good. We start having this conversation, that desire for excellence, for good, for right, is that same spirit that causes our children to get excited about learning. That when they get the answer, that they throw their hands up and they're excited about demonstrating that they in fact got it. And then some rabid, vulgar racist puts out that fire. Because we submitted our children to an education that we had no control of. See, this is about us, spirit, about our humanity. It is a spiritness that makes for ethical character. Ethical character. We are ethical people.
That's right.
You know, all the so crazy stuff we see today, that's not our stuff. That's swimming in somebody else's water. But also, we are ethical people. We recognize that when elders spoke, it was an ethical requirement that you quieted yourself. You can't talk about, I got no PhD from University of Pittsburgh, I work at the university that I'm an elder. No, when your uncle spoke and he was working on a railroad, had no education, when he came in the room, you gave deference. Even when he was drunk, you gave deference. But sometimes that happened too. They get off, you know, we get all in our celebration and go off somewhere, but the fact of the matter is that there was an ethical character of the African being. That the brothers on the corner, drinking wine, talking loud, saying nothing, cussing. Sister walked by, the bum, the dirt, whoops, excuse me, ma'am. Whoops, excuse me, ma'am. Because there was a spiritness that required ethical character.
Yeah.
Now we see little young girls on the corner talking the way that I just want to run and hide myself. I can't believe that this language is coming out of this precious baby. Because we what? The spiritness has been quieted. The spirit, that thing that connects us, the inner essence of the outer envelope has been quieted. That ethical character and conduct. We've always been people that were concerned with ethical character and right conduct. That's what Ma'at was about.
That's right.
Ma'at is right conduct, but it's right conduct that says that you stand on truth. That you relate in righteousness, that you in fact establish balance, that you create order where there was no order. I believe that that's our nature. That in fact when our young boys get that 12, 13 years old, they think they're men, and they start walking that walk, and they start walking that mannish walk, and they go out on the street, they just sort of stand and hang out. They are trying to instinctually establish order. But because we have not taught them the nature of how you do that, then they establish turf. That this is my part, and I will kill you if you come on my part. But their instinct is to say it is the nature of the black man to establish order. I point out that when you all go to ancient Kemet, you will not find, unless it's really been corrupted, a single statue in Egypt that has one with a nose on it. But you will not find one with a black man standing other than with his left foot forward. Why is that profound and important? Because the ancestors told us and taught us that the left foot forward was the sign of the pharaoh stamping out evil snake eye pepper. Yes. that the nature of the black man is to put his left foot forward to establish order. To establish order, to stamp out disorder represented by the evil snake eye patch. What happens when in our spiritness, in the creative moment, brothers come out the house and say, our instinct tells us, they don't know, absolutely they don't know, but the instinct tells us that it is my nature to stamp out disorder. But because we have not taught them to read the signs of their own biological grammar, they don't realize that the left foot forward represents a profound, deep understanding that the left side of the body is controlled by the right side of the brain, and the right side of the body is controlled by the left side of the brain, and the right hemisphere is responsible for a holistic, comprehensive, aesthetic appreciation of everything. And that when I come out here, we do not also understand that in ancient Kemet, that in fact, the sign of the double crossing represented everlasting life, that you can't kill this. This lives on forever. So here's a 13-year-old boy coming out and speaking the metal nature in his body. And we're not teaching him. He says, I am going to be in understand and comprehend everything, and you can't touch this. We need to, and that's critical for us to understand our way. See, otherwise, he's just a little arrogant bastard. He just come out here being arrogant and being rude. But it is our instinct. See, that's that spiritness. It's the instinct that reads to us. It is the same instinct that allows us in the church. When the reverend does something automatically every single time the exact same way. He looks over his left shoulder and tells the choir, y'all sing that song you know I like so well. And they start jamming. He said, I'm going to invite personally the Lord in this here house. And as that spirit gets into that church, I'm sitting there with my PhD, cool and calm, conservative, and all of a sudden his hand starts to take over. The hand starts to take over, and before you know it, I'm raising up the sign of Ka, and the metal nature. Ka, the spirit. And when we start getting happy, we're in fact raising up the sign of Ka. Or if I walk out here in the mean streets of Pittsburgh and some brother in a drug, cocaine crazed drama drops his gun on me and says, give me your money, I don't say, excuse me, I am Dr. Noble's world-renowned psychologist, got my degree from Stanford University, PhD cum laude. Don't you know who you're talking to? I say, oh shit. What's up? What's up? Now, it is the spiritness that tells me in that moment, there is no achieved status that can protect me. The only thing that can protect me is giving it to the Spirit. Giving it up to the God. It's not giving up. It is invoking. See, that's the other thing. You need to understand our stuff. White folks say, you giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm invoking the only power that is a power. See, that's the Spirit. Now, we need to teach our children that.
That's right.
We need to teach our children to understand that the grammar of their bodies speak the metal nature. That the grammar of our bodies talk. The sister with her hand on her hip. That's metal nature. We need to understand that the movement of the neck, that's metal nature. You all know, but that is, and it really is. And we need to begin to go back to reclaiming our stuff. Reclaiming our stuff. That's Sankofa. Sankofa says, go back and fetch what is yours and go forward. Go back and get your stuff. Don't get nobody else's stuff. Don't drop down no bucket. Go get your stuff and creep forward. We need to understand these things as we can look at that. The spiritness says there's a desire for order and beautiful. Your mama wasn't just reach up grabbing something when she said, baby, God don't like ugly. She's saying that it is your conduct that makes you pretty. It's not what you look like, it's your conduct that makes you pretty. See? And so we need to understand that there's an emotional sense of divine agency. Divine agency. Black folk, no matter, and this happens in Africa a lot, get all this educated in Europe and England and Holland and everywhere, and stuff get real crazy. Brothers go back to the readings, go back to the Orisha, go back to the spirit, because they understand that there's a divine agency. Your mama understood it. People talking fast, trying to sell you stuff, take your land. He said, I got to go sleep on this. I got to go think about this. I got to go pray on this. And that was not because we were so trapped in religion. It was, in fact, a recognition that it is divine agency, that there's a higher order. That's right. A higher order that rules everything. And that higher order starts in childhood. Yes. When you look at your big brother, your big sister, and you move to your aunt and uncle, and you move to your mama, and that every one of us has that miracle moment when we go on some holiday to grandma's house. and your grandmama tells your mama to shut up and leave that child alone. And you say, oh, Lord, mama got a mama. The recognition that there is a hierarchy of authority that is nurturing. See, again, it's important to recognize that we use this word. The hierarchy in the African tradition was a hierarchy of nurturance, not a hierarchy of dominance.
That's right.
In the European model, the hierarchy is that you got to get to the top so you can dominate everybody else. In the African tradition, the hierarchy is that that which is above you nurtures and protects you. That which is below you, you have to protect and nurture. So you find yourself in a profound network of security. We're breaking up. We're doing literally things are falling apart because our structure has not been allowed. That divine agency is important. That you, in fact, can see that your mama is an authority, but your mama can leave the house and say to your sister, when I come back here, don't let it happen. And your sister slams that door, and each of us say, oh, Lord, she's going to start trying to act like mama. But think about why we're saying that. Because there's been a transference of what? Agency. Agency. And we need to go back to that. Children to grow up understanding that this is a responsibility, that those above you do have authority for you. That's why in our community, when you did bad, Mrs. Wilson could get up off her stoop, go down those stairs, whip your behind. And then when you got home, it was told, and you didn't have no telephone. But somehow you knew, and your mama gave you another whipping, not for the original crime, but for you making Mrs. Wilson whip your behind. And you could never say, she was minding my business. I didn't make it. No, the fact of the matter is that you did because every adult had responsibility for the rearing of every other child. And when you witness a child doing wrong, you were compelled to intercede.
That's right.
And that we need to take that back.
That's right.
Sankofa, we need to go back to that. We need to go look at that. We need to understand that the spirit in us, spirit is the internal essence and the outer envelope. That the spirit in us is the magnetic pull that pulls us away from mere animal, physical existence toward a higher, nobler, more perfect, more excellent existence. It is that thing. It is that higher excellence that allowed black people to look at those times in our history when Jack Johnson and Joe Louis were fighting the bums of the mountain. And every single black person with a radio would listen to that fight, and when it looked like brothers in trouble, we were in trouble. When he knocked him out, we knocked him out. That we took pride in because that was that connection. And that we walked proud of the next day. That a black person achieved. We still have that. We still have it, but now we have it, the problem is reversed. We get on the bus and brothers acting crazy, and we say, man, come on, blood, man, chill this shit out, man, come on. You know, be cool, man. Other folk don't do that. Other folk be ringing the bell, bus driver, put him off, he's bothering me. You're imposing on my right to be on this bus. We didn't have rights. We had responsibility. See, and we need to go back to that. Sankofa, go back to saying, I'm responsible for you, brother. You're not doing right by your woman. Let me take you over here and talk to you. Let me talk to you. Pull my coattail when I'm out there stretched out. That's responsibility. Now, so you can't get into my business. You know, I have a right to do what I want. I'll whip her ass if I feel. No, we can't tolerate that. See, we have a responsibility, and our spirit dictates that. The spirit dictates that. It is the spirit that gives us the inner power. That's the final thing I want to say about spirit. It is the spirit that gives us this inner power to have dignity. See, African people are noble. We have dignity. We have dignity, but when we get out of our culture, then we take on the fabric and the rubric of other people. We end up being pale by comparison. We, in fact, represent that law, that if you don't exist according to your African essence, everything you think you are will be a diminishment, will be a lessening, will be an inferiorization of who we are. It is the responsibility of the healer, of reclaiming that tradition, that we understand that the African healer sees the spirit, literally sees it, sees the spirit in you. It is the African healer that speaks to the spirit. That's what I believe is the role of the African psychologist. It is the healer's responsibility to awaken the people's spirit. It is in fact that spirit, that force, that we must re-energize. We must reclaim it. We must understand the process of transcendence and of transformation. That we in fact have to transcend that which is trying to negatively transform us. We can't become like white folks in order to beat white folks. See, we can't believe this logic that says if we get in it, that we can change it. Don't work like that.
That's right.
Don't work like that. We have to stand on who we are, and the vibration of our power changes that which is outside and alien to us. So we have to understand this in a different way now, I suggest to you. That we begin to understand that we are not able to not only join the ancestors in our communion with libation, in our communion with invoking, but through the process of touching the heart, we become our ancestors. Because energy in science never loses or diminishes. It only transforms. And that the spirit that is Malcolm is in this room today. The spirit that is Sojourner Truth is in this room today. That we can call upon that and we can awaken that as science. Not as no Afrocentric spookism, but as science, that we can begin to understand that the African term of Kuguza Mtima means to touch the heart. And it's been our tradition always to focus on the heart. That's why the blues singer says she's hard-hearted, she's cold-hearted, she's mean-spirited. Our ancestral voice always reminded us that when you touch the heart, you stimulate the spirit.
That's right.
We have to touch the heart of our children. We have to understand that the highest healing work is not me helping a patient. The healer in the African tradition has to see beyond the present moment, has to see beyond the tomorrow. The healer must see the needs of their community for 500 years from now, for 1,000 years from now. The therapeutic practice that we engage in as black psychologists must be designed to prepare us for the millennia, not for next week's job interview. We have to begin to understand the greater work, that the healing craft is in fact a craft to heal the whole community. You can't heal individuals. You have to heal the whole community. And that the greatest disease in the African tradition is the disease of disintegration, disunity, disharmony. And that we have to begin to correct that by what? Awakening the spirit. It is in fact this argument, this proposition, that I propose to you because I know that we have done this. And in the African tradition says that if you did it, you can do it again. We need to recognize that we did it. We had a process of stimulating, awakening the spirit where we created character and quality in our people that you all recognize. It is the Sankofa. It is the awakening of the spirit that we can begin to recreate family systems, community environments that will create black men and women who have the competence of a W.B. Du Bois and a Mary Bacall Bethune, who have the confidence of a Muhammad Ali and a Wilma Rudolph, who have the consciousness of a Malcolm X and a Yaa Asantewaa, who have the defiance of an Elijah Muhammad and a Rosa Parks, who have the discipline to craft of a Charles Drew or a Josephine Baker, the duty of a David Walker or a Mary Church Terrell, the intelligence of a George Washington Carver and Evelyn Boyd Granville, the devotion to race of a Ramses II and Kandake, Queen of the Moreau, the commitment of a Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman, the ability to contribute their material wealth and resources of a Bill Cosby or Madam C.J. Walker, the integrity of a Paul Robeson or a Zora Neale Hurston, the courage of a Nat Turner and Sojourner Truth, and ultimately, the character of an Imhotep and a Hatshepsut. Ashe.
Family, questions and answers. We'll take a few minutes to do that. It's already after 9, so a few minutes for questions and answers, and then we'll retire for the evening. Family, also there will be books for sale in the back of the auditorium. I will do that now. Please, questions and answers. Feel the questions for you, please.
If you would just raise your hand, perhaps stand up so everyone can hear the question.
No questions?
No questions?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Go home.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yes, sir.
Brother.
Black concept and African concept?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the difference between the black concept and the African concept?
Actually, no. I can suggest to you that concepts as instruments of science are invented to capture a certain kind of phenomena or reality. And that, so it is a label that has to be appropriate to the phenomena. And that in a racist society that defines the phenomena called human being in color terms, then the idea of blackness representing our integrity is appropriate. But in a cultural sense, it is not a biological designation, but it's a cultural one. And at this point, African is a better, more comprehensive concept to represent the phenomena called African people than blackness. Africa has a problem, however, because in Africa there are usurpers and invaders that now have generations of having occupied Africa and want to claim the designation of African. So as we struggle with this issue of what is the concept that represents the phenomena, even African may be replaced for a better concept. But right now, in terms of my own work, I think the concept African, not Afro-American, not African-American, but African is a better label that represents scientifically the phenomena we're looking at. Brother.
I had a quick question. I don't know if you touched on it before because I came in late. But,
yeah, I did, man. You missed it too.
yeah, I'm sorry. I had
No, I didn't.
But my question is, to raise consciousness in a community such as this, Homewood, more or less, they're trying to revitalize the community. So, but how do you raise the consciousness for people to support black businesses, and what key concepts would a program need to have people come back in the community and support their own businesses?
Yeah, I think that this is how you do that.
Okay.
The community has to have conversation. We have to have family conversation. And then we also need to show the community the success and the high quality. The message that Africans are noble. I mean, in fact, the biblical passage is not that the princes will come out of Egypt and Ethiopia will stretch out her hand. The original passage was that the noble will come out of Egypt and the princes will stretch out their hand in Ethiopia. It is that nobility that I think that we are attracted to. So when we start talking about black business, those black businesses have to represent that high quality and nobility, and that's the magnet for us. But we also have to have a conversation about this life and death. It's not just about you have an option to go to a white business or black business. Black business is life and death. But the business itself has a responsibility of being African. And by being African, it has to have high quality. You can't have no, I'm just white business and black face. It has to be have that
For a
quality.
young person like myself, to have that type of credibility, would I have to prove somebody who is noble, who is respected in the community to
Yes.
support my business?
In the African tradition, there was I think I just did something wrong. In the African tradition, there's a process of mastering the master. As a young person, you have to be a master, and then you become a master. It happens in music all the time. It happens in other areas where we learn from a master. So you need to, I believe, if you do it the African way, then you will come under the sponsorship of a master. And you will learn your craft from a master. Because that master has the responsibility of making sure that you don't become an exploiter of the community. And then you go off the master and become a master yourself. So we need to create those masterships. We need to create those places where you can learn the craft, business, art, or whatever it is, under a master.
Thank you.
But there's a sister back. I'll come back to you. I thought there was a sister. Brother William?
I wanted to ask you about some of the so-called unethical ways of doing psychiatry has been enforced by a brother in Nigeria called Dr. Lambo. And he has come out with Eurocentric uses of techniques for iron neurosis, whatever, and has used education. And I was wondering, are you planning, or the black psychologists also planning on dealing with the whole psyche?
Yes, yes. In fact, I'm going to, I'm the president of the National Association. I'm going to Ghana in May because we have already established a relationship with the National Association of Psychic and Traditional Healers in Ghana. And we are working on a covenant that we will exchange techniques and information and practice between the National Association of Black Psychologists and the traditional psychic healers in Ghana. And so that is part of this reawakening that we're looking at. Now, Lambeau talks about European psychiatry married to traditional techniques. But as I look at his work, it's the traditional techniques that is happening, and that psychiatry is just giving it legitimacy.
And when you go and talk to our traditional brothers and sisters, I think it's incumbent upon us and you as our representatives that they continue making sacrifices for our upliftment and for this cruel, brutal plan to be turned around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, sister. Brother, right here.
Explain scientific.
Can I explain scientific colonialism? No, I forgot it. Some things to hold on to. No. I don't remember enough about this.
Can you cite
TI. I hope everybody is filling out the survey that the local chapter of Black Psychologists has circulated, because that's part of our responsibility for documenting the damage, in this case, loss and trauma in our community, so that we can begin to reawaken the spirit. So don't just carry us home with you. Fill it out and leave it for the association, please. The Saku Shetty comes out of the Meadow Nation, comes from my study in the Meadow Nation. If anyone has this survey completed, please show us and we can collect them up. Any last question? Yes, brother.
about the
Asians, other than that they were us, I don't know much about it. Yes, absolutely. Children? Don't do that. That's not good. You should not do that. But you have, in this city right now, you have a local chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists. You as a parent can request that this particular psychologist see your child. If you have a local chapter of Black Psychologists, you can request that your child be seen by a Black psychologist. You don't have to take anybody. Bernie, you want to identify yourself, please? This is the local chapter chair of the Black Psychologists here in Pittsburgh.
Man, just want to say real thank you.
Thank you, brother. Okay, brother, how you doing?
Hey, you know what? That information I gave you, my brother took care of
Correction? I thought, no, that was good because you were taking a look.
you had a lot of real money. I read it. It's from chapter here to